Hey y'all, welcome to another board game review. My name is Bryan and I am with Kamangamoo Creations, and today we are going to be reviewing Bristol. This is a game created by Facade Games, and they have made a couple different games like this. It's a really cool design box that they have that it actually looks like a book. And so you could have this on your shelf. Pretty cool. They've got, I think, 3 other games that are very similar to this. This was their latest one that they put on Kickstarter. I jumped on it and got this one. I would like to get the other ones, but yeah, so let's kind of go over some of the components. So obviously you got this box, pretty cool. And then inside you've got the instructions, but then everything fits nicely inside this box. So some of the other components that they have with it is they have the mats, which is the board game. Let's flip it around to the right way there. So this is the map that you're going through with Bristol. They have some really cool dice. Let's show these for you. So they are 6 different dice that have an apple or a rat of each of the colors of the carts that you have. So here are the different carts that they have. They have 3 different colors. One's a cedar, birch, and oak. But yeah, these are just plastic. I think there were some upgrades that the Kickstarter could do where those became metal. And then there's some player pieces. There's 9 different player pieces. Not sure on exactly with the other Kickstarter versions. I think I just got the basic with it. But then you also have some cards in a nice little card box here. And with the cards, you have a few different characters that you can be. Each of these characters do have a special action that if you wanted to play with the advance, you could be able to have those advanced special actions. Then you have remedy cards and symptoms. These remedies give you different actions, and you have 2 different options to be able to play with on each of those. And then also they have symptoms. And each of these are just super simple, but they just have different number values, and I'll explain what those number values do in just a minute. So those are the basic components. Let's kind of dive into what's actually happening with the game. It's set in Bristol in 1350. This is during the time of the Black Plague. And what's happening is you are in your cart. You've got different players in here that will be in these carts. And then you are trying to go and move through the city and eventually trying to make your way out of the city without getting the plague. Now, if you do get the plague, then you're trying to have everybody else get the plague along with you. But if you are the first cart to be able to leave, anybody in your cart, if y'all don't have the plague, then y'all win. If one person in the cart does have the plague, then everybody else has the plague and you don't win. So it's the first one out of the city without having the plague. That whole cart wins the game. So this is a 1 to 9 player game. You can play it by yourself in solo mode, but you do still have to have 4 characters that are playing. So if you only have 2 players, you have 2 others that are kind of ghost players. It is nice to be able to have, at least 4 where you have the full human interaction, but it's actually really fun to be able to have all 9. So if you can get 9 people to play with you, it's really fun to be able to have that social interaction. How it really works at the beginning is however many players you have, you put all their playing pieces into this black little bag that they give you, and then you draw one out at a time, and whoever you draw at the first will go at the very beginning of the cart. And so this first one is the birch cart, then you have the cedar, and then the oak cart. So we'll draw one out. Let's just say the red players first. So after you set up everybody into their cart at the beginning, you also are going to deal out 2 symptom cards to every player. Now these symptom cards have different values on them. And at the very beginning, you eliminate any of the 4s. So you take out the 4s, and that's a 4 as well. But you take out any of the 4s and divide them up, 2 cards per each player. If at the very beginning you have 2 3s, then you actually discard those and you get 2 new cards. So each player will have at least a 5 at the very beginning or lower. If during the game you ever get to have 6, if you ever get 6 or more as far as the value of the 2 cards together, you then have the plague. And that is, you're going to have the plague for the rest of the game. There'll be other times when you're switching out cards, switching out these symptom cards, that you may get less later in the game. But once you get the plague, you have the plague for the rest of the game, even if these values become lower. And so as a player that then gets the plague, your new goal is to try to get everybody else to have the plague along with you and try to make sure everybody else is sick and they don't win the game. Because if you get everybody else sick, then you technically win the game. You get everybody else to have the plague. So you divvy these out, everybody gets 2 of them at the very beginning of the game, and then also depending on how many players you have, you can be able to give remedy cards. If you have less amount of players, then the remedy cards are given out to them. If you have more than, I think, 5 or something like that, then like nobody gets remedy cards at the beginning. But that is an action later. You can be able to draw more of those to be able to get them. So once you have all your characters, you've got your symptoms at the very beginning that don't add up to 6, remedies for the beginning to divvy those out. You then have somebody roll the dice. So once you roll the dice, you can be able to see what the dice have. Right now we have 3 apples that go along with the birch cart. You've got 1 rat that's going along with the cedar cart, and then an apple and a rat that is going along with the oak cart. So what's going to happen is that red player at the front, they get to do their turn first, and then in a circle, clockwise, everybody else will be able to have their opportunity to be able to play their turn. So during your turn, you have different options that you can be able to do, different actions that you can play during your turn. Everybody does have a special action on their card. So depending on if you actually want to play with those special actions or not, you can be able to choose to do that special action. But the other main actions in the game is you can re-roll 2 of the dice. So if you don't like 2 specific dice, you can re-roll those. Another action is that you could draw a remedy card. So you could be able to draw that. And then the other action is pawn movement. So you can move up 1 in a cart. So if this green one, it was their turn and they wanted to push past the black player, then they would be able to push it past. You can also dash in front. So if the purple wanted to dash in front and jump into this cart, it would push the yellow one back. And then you can also do what's called a push. A push is where if you are in the middle or the front of the cart, you can push one of the players backwards. And so you can, if you're in a cart that has an empty space in the cart behind you, let's say there's only 2 players in the cart behind you, you can then push one of the players into the cart behind you. You're like, I don't want this guy, he probably has a plague. Let's kick him out and push him into the cart behind us. So those are the different ways that you can be able to move your pawn or somebody else's pawn in the cart as you're going along in the carts. You can also, with these remedy cards, you can be able to play any of them that you want to during your turn. You can play as many as you want, but with these, you only get to choose one of the 2 options that are on this card. So as you're playing your turn, a lot of players, a lot of times you can be able to re-roll these. If I was in this birch cart, I would want to keep those apples for sure. But these other players that are in these other carts, I would want to try to have the birch not have as many apples. The apples represent how many times you move. So at the end of everybody's turn, depending on how many apples, so if this was the dice that we had at the very end, let's actually just move this to another rat so we can explain that a little bit. What would happen is the birch cart would move 3. So you got 1, 2, and 3 because they have 3 apples. The apples represent movement. Let's just pretend that this red also had an apple. They would move up 1. And then the oak cart doesn't have any apples, so they wouldn't move, but they have 2 rats. These 2 rats symbolize a mingle. So what's going to happen during their turn, during the end of that turn, is this birch cart, everybody has, there's 3 people in this. They have their symptoms. So 3 people have their symptoms. You add a new symptom card from the deck, and you add that into a mix. And everybody has all of their symptoms mixing around and mingling with one another. And then you deal out 2 new symptoms per each player and discard the other one that isn't needed. And so your new player might have a 6. Well, all of these only added up to 5 on each of them. So nobody got the plague on this one. But if one player did have these mix around and did have at least 6 or more, then one of that player would have the plague, and then their new goal is to try to get everybody else to have the plague. So when you're rolling these dice, you definitely do not want 2 rats. If you have 2 rats at the end of that round, then you mingle and there's a possibility to get the plague. You definitely want to get apples. Apples are great because then you can move further in the advancement out of the city, trying to get out of the city without the plague. But once again, if somebody in your cart has that plague, you want to get rid of them. So there's a lot of fun being able to manipulate and work with people that probably don't have the plague, but then also there's that question that somebody else might have the plague and trying to get them out of your cart. It makes it a lot of fun to be able to have that social interaction with it. Okay, so let's talk about a couple things that I don't like with the game. And it's simple for the fact that if you only have like 2 players in a cart and it moves around a little bit, a lot of times a player will fall into the cart. That's just a simple, basic thing. Doesn't really ruin the game at all. It's just annoying to try to have to get him out of the cart and try to reset him back up. And as I did that, the red guy fell down. So there's only 2 players in the cart. It makes it difficult to be able to keep that going. A lot of times I just let them lay down and take a nap because then it holds the blue player in place as that red player is kind of laying down. So that's one thing, but that's a simple thing. It doesn't like ruin the game at all. It just is an annoyance. Another thing that I don't necessarily like with the game, and it doesn't really ruin the game function at all, it's the colors on each of these player cards. They are very similar, and you can't really tell if it's a black or purple, or also the orange, yellow, and red. Let's see if I can get a couple of those. Are very similar as well, and it's hard to be able to tell the difference between each of these. Like I really can't tell in this lighting which one's yellow, orange, or red. There's, I think I found a red. So these ones are yellow and orange. You've got a red one here. So those are a couple things that are not so much fun with the game. One aspect of the game is that if you don't have a lot of mingling happening, then it doesn't make it as fun throughout the game. If you're going and moving throughout the game and there's not a lot of mingling, then everybody knows that we all don't have the plague. Let's just keep moving forward and get out of the game. But every time that I have played, I would say that we eventually started mingling at the end, and that made it a lot of fun to try to decide who has a plague and who doesn't. Should I kick this person out? Should I leave them in? Should I try to make it to the end with this other person? And you're also trying to, deceive others if you do have the plague, trying to make sure that you get through to the end and you infect everybody else that you can. So there's a lot of social interaction with that. If it doesn't really happen and there's not a lot of mingling, then that does tend to make it a little boring at the beginning. But every time I've played, we've always had some mingling, and we've always had somebody getting the plague in one way or the other. So it has been fun in that regards as we have been playing. So let's talk about some things that I love about this game. I love the social interaction that is causing. Because you have to, if you get the plague, you have to try to deceive everybody else and try to help them understand that you don't have the plague and that you're just fine. But there are also times when you don't get the plague. You mingle, but then you don't get the plague, and you're trying to still tell people and help them understand that you still don't have the plague and that you're fine and you're healthy, but some other people might not believe you. And so it's fun to be able to have that social interaction with this game. I do also really like just the basic actions. It's super simple to whether you're re-rolling the dice or you're moving people around and moving, in another cart, trying to figure out, should we play with this player, should we not? Those decisions are impactful. I also like how it's set up, like the person that's at the very front of the first cart. So as you're moving around, the carts will change different places of who's in the lead. And so the player that's in the very start of that first cart, they kind of take their turn, and then it just goes in a circle. You don't worry about the order of everybody else. And so it is fun sometimes to not be the first person in the front of the cart, because then you make the decision at the very beginning, where the player that's at the very end of that circle, they get to really have the final say with what kind of dice are going to be rolled or not. And so it's nice to be able to not be the first person, but it's also, you want to be the first person to end. And so it does have that little dynamic of trying to strategize and also trying to make sure that your cart can be at the end, of making it out of the city first. Well, hopefully this was helpful for you. If you are interested in it, I will leave a link in the description below that you can be able to find a link to this, whether it's on Amazon or their website. I'll be able to try to figure it out of exactly what the best way is to be able to get your own game of this. I'll also leave links in the description that talk about or have the link to their other games that they have as well, whether that's on Amazon or the website. I'll have that for you guys so you guys can be able to check that out. If you do like this review, I mean, I try to be very simple and quick with it, but if you do like it, please leave a comment below. Talk about what you like about my reviews, what you don't like, and if there's other questions you have about it, as I didn't talk about every single little detail of what could happen in the game. Let me know. Let me know if there's something that you have more questions about that I could be able to help answer with. I really like this game. I really enjoy it, and the more players you have, the more fun it really is as you're going around and trying to figure out who has a plague and who doesn't. Also, you can kick people off at the very last cart. If you push somebody off, they are out of the game. And if they have the plague, then hey, hallelujah, you kick somebody out of the game that had the plague. But if they didn't have the plague and you kick them off, then you also lose the game as well. You get booted off as well. Because you kicked somebody off that was healthy, then you also are out of the game as well because you kicked somebody off that was healthy. So that leaves another fun dynamic that I really enjoy. So I really, I need to give some kind of rating system, but I really give it a good 2 thumbs up, a good old 5. I would love to be able to play this game again and again. It really doesn't take that long to be able to play. Obviously, with more players, they have to think about it. It does take a little bit longer, but really within a half an hour or so, you can easily get through a game and be able to get out of the city and have somebody be able to complete it. Also, if you do like this review, please like it, give a good old thumbs up, subscribe. Let me know what I can do to be able to improve, to be able to help these become better. That way you guys can be able to enjoy better videos in the future. Have a great day and enjoy your gaming.